The passage also punches big holes into the notion that the present polluted Temple Mount will be the location of the final temple. The eastern gate to the Temple Mount, the one the Muslim warlord Saladin walled up in 1187 to prevent the Jewish Messiah from returning, couldn't be the eastern gate Ezekiel was referring to. There are to be two eastern gates, one facing the other across the outer court, and the way they're described in Ezekiel 40 as massive buildings over 87 feet long doesn't remotely equate to the small bricked-in passageway on the eastern wall of the Temple Mount. By the way, note that Yahweh roundly denounces hero worship as idolatry. He specifically named other gods and dead kings, making me shudder when I contemplate American edifices like the Washington Monument. And I think we can safely extrapolate the principle for our times. Do not raise political figures, sports heroes, or entertainment stars to the level of demigods in your imagination. Your favorite presidential candidate can't accomplish anything outside of the framework of God's sovereignty. Heaven and earth do not turn upon the platform of any political movement, no matter how right or beneficial you think it may be. Worship Yahweh alone. Yahweh now tells Ezekiel,
Son of man, describe to the people of Israel the temple I have shown you. Tell them its appearance and its plan, so they will be ashamed of all their sins. And if they are ashamed of what they have done, describe to them all the specifications of its construction, including its entrances and doors, and everything else about it. Write down all the specifications and directions as they watch, so they will be sure to remember them. And this is the basic law of the temple: absolute holiness. The entire top of the hill where the temple is built is holy. Yes, this is the primary law of the temple. Ezekiel 43, 5-12, NLT.
Here we are being told by God Himself that the design and specifications of the temple reflect and demonstrate the very holiness of Yahweh. Everything within the temple compound is said to be metaphorical of the nature of Yahweh or some aspect of His plan of redemption. Its very magnificence should shame the guilty heart into repentance. We are given another clue here as to the precise location of the temple. As it says in the New King James,
The whole area surrounding the mountaintop shall be most holy. Verse 12.
If you'll recall, the site of the present Temple Mount doesn't cover the highest peak of Mount Moriah, the mountain top, but only the part that was enclosed within Jerusalem's ancient city walls. The far more significant portion of Moriah is northwest of the Temple Mount, the summit outside the city wall, also known as Bezetha or Bezita, a.k.a. Golgotha, the place where Yahshua's blood was spilled, where his broken body rested in a tomb, and where he rose triumphantly under his own power. As I pointed out back in chapter 13, I believe the Ark of the Covenant was secreted away in a cave beneath this part of the mountain by the prophet Jeremiah during the Babylonian invasion. And through a divinely orchestrated series of events, the blood of Yahshua was literally, physically sprinkled upon the mercy seat, atoning for the sins of all mankind once and for all, if only we would accept his sacrifice. It's no wonder that Yahweh told Ezekiel that the mountain top would be holy. I would guess that the millennial temple's holy place will be positioned at Golgotha, directly above the resting place of the ark, 1,500 feet or so northwest from where it was in Solomon's temple. And what about the ark itself? Will that be hauled up and placed in the new Holy of Holies? No, Yahweh has kept his promise. It has served its purpose. There will be no more blood sprinkled upon the mercy seat. Yahshua is an impossible act to follow, especially if you're a bull or a goat. The very man who apparently secreted the ark out of the Holy of Holies and hid it beneath Mount Moriah wrote,
"It shall come to pass, when you are multiplied and increased in the land in those days, says Yahweh, that they will say no more, the ark of the covenant of Yahweh. It shall not come to mind, nor shall they remember it, nor shall they visit it, nor shall it be made any more. At that time Jerusalem shall be called the throne of Yahweh, and all the nations shall be gathered to it, to the name of Yahweh, to Jerusalem. No more shall they follow the dictates of their evil hearts. In those days the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel, and they shall come together out of the land of the north to the land that I have given as an inheritance to your fathers." Jeremiah 3:14-18.
The ark will be neither essential temple ritual furniture, nor museum attraction, nor the object of legendary quests. Jeremiah specifically says that no one will even make a replica of it during the millennium. In the light of Yahshua's presence, it will simply be forgotten. Since Yahweh almost never gives revelation on a particular subject to only one prophet, we shouldn't be too surprised to see a confirmation of Ezekiel's prophecy about the temple site being on a holy mountaintop in Isaiah's writings.
"It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of Yahweh's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem." Isaiah 2:1-3.
Golgotha, the place of Yahshua's execution, is located at the base of a low cliff, the top of which is the summit of Mount Moriah. I don't think there can be much doubt that this area is the mountain of Yahweh's house, spoken of by the prophet. The passage also implies that the geologic upheaval of the Day of Atonement will cause Moriah's peak to be uplifted above its present elevation, and indeed above all the other peaks in the vicinity. This is not the only geologic upheaval that will take place. Zechariah 2 speaks of a radically altered topography.
"All the land shall be turned into a plain from Jeba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem."
Jeba is about 5 miles northeast of Jerusalem, and Rimmon is some 35 miles southwest. That whole 40-mile stretch is hilly terrain today, but it will be a flat plain during the millennium.
"Jerusalem shall be raised up and inhabited in her place from Benjamin's gate to the place of the first gate and the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananiel to the king's winepresses. The people shall dwell in it, and no longer shall there be utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited." Zechariah 14:10-11.
In context, Zechariah has just finished describing the two rivers in verses 8 and 9, flowing from Jerusalem that we read about in our preceding chapter. Ezekiel 47 further informs us that they will originate from beneath the temple. That requires that the temple be on high ground, the continental divide, as it were, between the Mediterranean and the Jordan Valley. There is a notable lack of consensus concerning the precise layout of Jerusalem during the Second Temple period. Of course, it's the only city in the world where it matters. So there's a certain amount of guesswork involved here. Benjamin's gate was apparently on the north end of the Temple Mount. The Tower of Hananiel, or Hananel, was probably in that vicinity as well, slightly further west, though some, notably Josephus, identify it with the Tower of Hippicus, which was near the midpoint jog in the city's western wall. The corner gate was in the southwest corner of the upper city. If the king's wine presses were where you'd expect them to be, near the king's gardens at the extreme southern end of the city of David, Zach's description of what was to be raised up would seem to include all of the old city. Note as well that Zechariah says 3 times that this area will be inhabited. To my ears, this is confirmation of the theory that the new temple will be built at Golgotha, uphill and a 1/4 mile northwest of Solomon's temple. Nobody lives on the temple grounds, but later we'll see that the millennial priests' homes will be in a designated area 8 1/3 miles long and 3 1/3 miles wide, with the 875-foot square temple compound in the middle of it. So if Zach's raised up area is to be inhabited, the temple site is going to have to be somewhere other than the traditional Temple Mount. Jeremiah concurs and clarifies the area's description.
Behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh, that the city shall be built for Yahweh from the tower of Hananel to the corner gate. The surveyor's line shall again extend straight forward over the hill Gareb. Then it shall turn toward Goath, and the whole valley of the dead bodies and of the ashes, and all the fields as far as the brook Kidron, to the corner of the horse gate toward the east, shall be holy to Yahweh. It shall not be plucked up or thrown down any more forever. Jeremiah 31, 38 through 40.
Remember what I said a couple of dozen chapters ago about the cultural baggage of the Scriptures getting lost in transit? These are more than just place names. They tell us something wonderful about Yahweh's millennial plans. We've already located the Tower of Hananel and the corner gate, the entire north to south length of the upper city. The city built for Yahweh will extend that far. But Gareb and Goath were north of this, outside the old city walls. In fact, these were both unclean places in ancient times. Gibat Gareb was called Leper's Hill, and Goath, to the west of Gareb, was known as the Hill of Death, or of Roaring, or Groaning. There were many tombs in the area. You know it by another name, Golgotha. Though outside the city, these areas are now said to be holy to Yahweh, along with another formerly unclean area. The Valley of the Dead Bodies and of the Ashes can be none other than the dreaded Valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, the Jews' metaphor for hell itself, which runs south of the old city and joins the brook of Kidron on the east. Thus the total area described is almost a mile square. These place names demonstrate that what was formerly unclean, polluted, and impure, whether places or people, can and will be made holy, set apart for Yahweh's purposes. It's little wonder the psalmist gushed,
Great is Yahweh, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, and his holy mountain. Beautiful in elevation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. Psalm 48, 1 and 2.
The reason Zion is so often used synonymously with Jerusalem is that the old upper city was built on Mount Zion. It is directly west of Mount Moriah, with the Tyropoeon Valley separating them. So, what is on the north side of Zion? Golgotha. Surprise, surprise. We read in the description of the Great Day of Atonement earthquake, Revelation 11:13, that 1/10 of the city, that is Jerusalem, fell. When we see such language, we usually think in terms of buildings falling, and that is indeed one of the possible meanings of the Greek word for fell, which is pipto. But its primary meaning is to descend from a higher place to a lower. In light of our recent discoveries, I believe we've stumbled onto a statistical assessment of the topographical rearrangement of Jerusalem, while the old city, specifically the area around Golgotha, is to be elevated. 1/10 of the city will actually sink in elevation, making the mountain of God stand out as the highest peak in the area.